In this lesson, we're going to talk about how to introduce some basic JavaScript onto your HTML pages to give that a little bit more interactivity to your content. So going back, right back to one of the first lessons where we talked about the structure of a web page, where HTML is kind of the blueprint for it, the CSS tells you what it should look like, and then the JavaScript is going to give you that interaction. So if we're having a building, if the HTML is rendered out as a building, the CSS will be the exterior of the building, the interior, the colors, the way it's going to look, the materials, and so on. And then we would have JavaScript that could handle things like the elevator. When you push an elevator button, what happens? When you open a doorknob, what happens? And so on. So we're going to actually add in some clickable buttons here. So we had structured our initial page here that we've got these lessons, and maybe we want to have a preview of the content, or maybe just a button that says find out more. So the element to add in a button for HTML, you can just do button, and this gives you a typical button. We're just going to do type button, so you've got some options there, and what we're going to do is we're going to give this button some interactivity. So we've got some options here when we scroll down in Dreamweaver. So we've got on blur, so this is typical for a field where you're going off of the field, so it goes to blur. So that's not going to be really applying to the button, and the best one here is going to be on click. So we also have on mouse down, on mouse move, on mouse out, on mouse over. So we can apply those as well. So first we're going to just apply on click. And here we have to specify what we wanted to do and what we want to happen on click. So I'm going to call when it on click is activated, when this action is taken, I want to call to a JavaScript function called hello world. And to add JavaScript onto your page, all you have to do is do the same thing that we were doing with styling, where you're opening and closing the script tags. So what I want to do is actually, first of all, what we're going to do, we're just going to do a simple JavaScript function, and alert is a fairly simple one and straightforward one, where it pops up that alert button. So I'm just going to run this JavaScript function hello world, and I'm going to call this button. And again, this works just like all of these other HTML elements, where we've got our opening and closing, and whatever content is in here is actually going to be what makes up the button. So show alert. And now I can just go over, refresh the page, and I see that we do have this button and it says show alert, and here we've got this JavaScript alert that pops up, and in order to close it you can do OK, or you could just close that with the X. And as I said, I was going to actually tie this over to a JavaScript function, because a lot of times with JavaScript you're going to want to be reusing your functionality. So you might, so this really isn't the most effective way to get it to do hello world, although I'm not going to get too much into JavaScript within this lesson. But in order to call a JavaScript function, so this is how we set up a JavaScript function. So again, it's kind of similar as well to what we were doing previously with HTML, where we're able to actually access the values that are within this element, so within the script element. So this, the browser will understand, is JavaScript, and then over here we just call to that particular function in JavaScript. So when the browser comes to render out this content, it'll read it, it'll say, okay, this is an HTML page, opening HTML, and it can expect to have these different HTML elements within the HTML document. So it expects styles, it expects scripts, and if you are adding them, and again with scripts you can do it the same way as we did with styles and call to an external script, so something that isn't on the page itself and it's just a JS file. And so I'm just going down here and I'm just going to do that same on-click hello world, and here we're going to just have a function. So it's going to be the same thing, it's going to look the same, but you have to trust me that this is a better way to do this. So even though that it should initially look the same where we click it and we get this pop-up that says hello world, this is going to be a much more effective way to use functionality within your HTML and call to JavaScript than having all of that code. And again, it goes back to the same principles that we have to have flexibility. If we're building out, if our website was just one web page, then we could contain all of this here. But if we want to have multiple pages, it becomes a factor of reusability of the code, and if we do have updates, just the simple flexibility and ease that things can get updated. Again, similar to this, we might have some other functionality here, so we could do, going back to that usability and adding in these quick little JavaScript calls. You might have seen that we had that within Dreamweaver. On the drop down we had something called on mouse over, and again we can just call back out to our same function. So there it is, our reusability of the function. And so now when we refresh the page, and so we've got this button here that we created before, and here we've actually added in this, I already hovered over it, but here we've added in this ability to hover over and run that JavaScript function as well. So this is the starting point for developing additional functionality within your HTML code, and then you would just go out to build out additional JavaScript and work with that and integrate that into HTML, building out your website in that fashion.